The sign outside D'Ambrosio's promised open 24 hours, and the sign was technically right. But the light it cast in the pre-dawn Graustark gloom had the unsteady pulse of a hot 3:47 a.m. or 3:48. The clock on the kitchen wall, a monstrous grease-stained beast that had been there longer than anyone working at D'Ambrosio's, including the owner, sagged on its single bent nail and seemed to mock linearity. Its hands swam through the numbers like confused fish. Time was liquid here, bending to the town's strange gravity. Somewhere out past the parking lot, the river ran slow and silty, indifferent to whether the sign was on or off, indifferent to whether it was Texas on this side or Louisiana on the other. The river had its own program. John Frank, grad student, mixed media journalist, whatever that meant this week, late-night waiter at the nexus of Graustark, Texas, Louisiana, this riverboat-shaped restaurant wedged between reason and riot, between two states of being and two states of the Union.
He chronicled Graustark's oddities for a website nobody he knew read, his thesis advisor included.
He tried to map the town's intersecting realities, its hidden frequencies, the way yesterday sometimes bled into next Tuesday without so much as a by your leave. He saw it in the patrons who looked slightly out of sync, their eyes holding reflections of streets that did not exist on city maps. He heard it in the static between radio stations late at night, whispers that sounded suspiciously like stage directions.
Was he a witness? A participant? Hard to say. He felt like a character in someone else's slightly unhinged narrative, waiting for his scene, suspended between acts. The fool, maybe, poised at the cliff edge with one foot dangling over the abyss.
Inside, the fluorescent tubes hummed a B-flat dirge. John Frank had stopped hearing it the way you stop hearing a refrigerator, which is to say he heard it constantly, in his molars, in his sinuses, in the soft place behind his sternum where things he was trying not to think about made their nest. He wiped the counter again. The steel was cool and indifferent beneath his palm. The movement was automatic, a small ritual against the larger chaos, the sort of repetitive prayer a person makes when they have stopped believing in prayer, but cannot quite stop the hands. The bell over the front door rang once. It was not Fraser. It was too early for Fraser. A man John did not recognize entered, sat at booth 6, ordered coffee without looking up from a paperback whose title was peeling off the spine. John brought the coffee. The man drank the coffee. The man left $2 on the table and stood up and folded the paperback into his coat pocket, and on the way out, paused at the door and said without turning around,
"Watch yourself tonight, brother. The walls are thin."
Then he was gone, and the bell rang again behind him, and the wet asphalt of the parking lot took his footprints like it took everyone's, and that was that. John stood holding a damp rag, looking at booth 6, where the coffee cup was still steaming.
He had not, he was almost certain, told the man it was night. The clock on the wall said it was almost 4 in the morning. The man had said night, as if the day had a different name where he came from.
John folded the napkin from booth 6. White, paper, cheap. He folded it once, twice, 3 times, and then a 4th, into a shape that was not quite anything but resembled, if you squinted at it from the right angle and were willing to be generous, a flower. He tucked it into the back of his notebook. He did this without thinking and forgot about it almost immediately, and did not, for the next several months, understand why he had done it. The bell over the kitchen door, the back door, the one customers were not supposed to use, did not jingle. It jangled. A discordant chord slicing through the hum, snapping the fluorescence back into focus. Fraser Temple did not so much walk in as coalesce from the shadows of the kitchen alcove. Leather bomber jacket, stained with substances that might have been solder flux, might have been hot sauce, might have been transmission fluid, certainly were not, at this point, identifiable. Hair, a chaotic sculpture defying gravity, and 3 of the laws of thermodynamics. Notebook tucked under his arm like a holy text, or a bomb schematic, and possibly both. His gaze landed on John. The gaze had weight. The gaze had been waiting.
Still chasing shadows, Johnny?
The voice was a gravelly rumble, sandpaper on velvet. He pulled up a stool and straddled it backward and instantly commanded the space, as if he had built the diner around himself by sitting in it.
Or are the shadows finally chasing you?
Just trying to make it make sense, Joneses. The old refrain tasted like ash, the way it always did. Keeping up with Fraser Temple was like trying to map a hurricane with a crayon. You did the work, knowing the work would be wrong. The wrongness was part of the point.
Fraser laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling in a metal drum. He tapped the cover of his notebook. Diagrams adorned it that looked suspiciously like circuit boards woven into mandalas.
Sense is overrated. Structure is the illusion. You know that.
He pulled out his phone, or rather, the customized jury-rigged device that served Fraser as a phone. Its casing chipped, wires peeking out like frayed nerves, screen glowing with internal light that did not match any of the available wallpapers.
The demons are restless tonight. They feel something coming.
John knew about the demons. Everyone in Fraser's orbit eventually knew about the demons. Fraser called them his humorous electronic imps, digital sprites birthed from code and chaos. Harmless was not the word. They talking about the patterns?
He gestured vaguely toward the town outside, the river, the divide between Texas and Louisiana, sense and nonsense.
The patterns are shifting, Johnny. The walls are getting thin. You feel it, don't you? Don't lie. You feel it in your teeth. They say the architect is getting sloppy, or maybe, he grinned, a flash of brilliance and madness, maybe the decay is the design.
He thought about the man in booth 6. The walls are thin. Almost the same words. He did not mention it. He had a working theory that mentioning a thing to Fraser Temple summoned more of that thing into the world.
Fraser turned the phone screen toward him. On the screen, a sequence of geometric shapes pulsed in slow rotation, blue and green, and a color John had never seen on the screen before, a kind of luminous bruise that did not seem to belong to the visible spectrum. The shapes were, perhaps, a city seen from above. The shapes were, perhaps, a circuit. The shapes were, perhaps, both.
Working on a new model city myself, more resilient. Thought you should see.
Why?
Because someone has to be the witness, Johnny. That's your job. I appreciate that you take it seriously. I appreciate that you take it more seriously than you should.
John looked at his own notebook, open beside the coffee mug, filled with cryptic observations, overheard snippets, hand-drawn diagrams of Graustark's warped ley lines. He was trying to document the decay. Fraser was, evidently, building new decays from scratch.
Architect of Decay, John had scribbled once in the margin next to Fraser's name. He had circled it. He still wasn't sure if it was a job title or a warning label. Maybe the story isn't about understanding it. Maybe it's just about surviving it.
Fraser clapped him on the shoulder. The contact was a jolt that vibrated through John's weary bones, a jolt that felt suspiciously like a small, deliberate transmission.
Hello, the jolt seemed to say, on a frequency below speech. Hello, stay alert. Sorry about what's coming.
Surviving? Where's the fun in that? The trick isn't to survive the fall, Johnny. It's to learn how to fly on the way down.
He paused at the door, hand on the push bar, a final pronouncement waiting to be delivered.
Or, Fraser said, at the very least, learn how to write about the landing.
He was gone. The kitchen door swung once, twice, and stilled. The smell of burnt sugar lingered for a long time and then began, slowly, to leave. John stood for a while at the counter. The hum of the fluorescence resumed its B-flat dirge. The clock on the kitchen wall continued failing to keep time. He poured the coffee Fraser had not finished into the sink and rinsed the mug and set it back on the rack to dry. He sat down on the stool Fraser had just vacated, opened his notebook, and began to write. His pen moved in the frantic, slightly desperate scratching that had become his only reliable response to being in the presence of Fraser Temple. He wrote down what Fraser had said about the patterns and the walls. He wrote down what the man in booth 6 had said about the walls, almost the same words, hours apart, between two people who had no reason to know each other. He wrote down the colors he had seen on Fraser's phone, even though one of them did not have a name. He wrote down Architect of Decay and underlined it twice.
I think something is starting. I think something has been starting for a long time, and I am only now noticing.
He closed the notebook. The folded napkin, white and cheap and shaped almost like a flower, sat between the pages where he had tucked it. The bell over the front door rang. A patron entered, sat in booth 4, ordered coffee without looking at the menu. John brought the coffee. The patron drank the coffee. The patron paid in cash, exactly correct, including tip. On the way out, the patron did not say anything. The patron did not need to. John watched the door swing closed. He watched the parking lot beyond the door, the pre-dawn light starting, finally, to thin the dark. He watched his own reflection in the glass, shadowed eyes, gaunt face, a young man at a counter waiting for his cue.
Suspended between acts, the fool on the cliff edge, 1 foot already out over the abyss. Behind him, the world he was supposed to be leaving. Below him, a fall he had not yet agreed to.
He picked up the rag. He wiped the counter. The movement was automatic. The hum continued. The night, by whatever name, kept being night. Outside, somewhere across the river, something that was not exactly thunder rolled once across the flat Louisiana sky, and then was quiet, and then resumed being something that was not exactly thunder. The cycle paused, took its breath. The fool, listening, took his. Fraser Temple called the warehouse his cathedral, though if any god worshipped here, it was a god of rust, of solder smoke, of obsolete frequencies still leaking from machines too old to remember what they had been built to do. The warehouse did not stand. The warehouse slumped, a great rusting beast at the industrial edge of Groustock, where the Texas side bled into Louisiana's swampy embrace, sighing petrochemical breath into the humid twilight. Outside, kudzu vines thick as wrists throttled the chain-link fence, a slow green strangulation that nature had begun and would in its own time finish. Inside, the air was thick and still, tasting of ozone from stressed circuits, of damp concrete, of something vaguely like burnt chicory, the ghost of Adelphia's deli clinging to him perhaps, or maybe just the smell of old capacitors finally giving up. Dust motes danced like static ghosts in the fractured light, bleeding through the wire-reinforced windows high above. Fluorescent tubes, cantankerous seraphim, sputtered overhead, casting a sickly, inconsistent pallor on the kingdom sprawled below. The kingdom covered the floor. Graustark, rendered in miniature. Not the Graustark the tourists saw, nor the one its Chamber of Commerce promoted, but Fraser's Graustark, a cyberpunk favela built from the bones of obsolete technology and Southern Gothic decay. Salvaged motherboards formed the plazas. Heat sinks rose like brutalist monuments at the corners of intersections that did not exist on any city map. Capacitors stood in for water towers, leaking electrolytic fluid in patterns that traced, if you were willing to see it, the watershed of the actual river outside. Tiny LEDs pulsed erratically within tenement blocks crafted from rusted HVAC ducting and discarded server racks. Fiber optic cables snaked through streets paved with shattered smartphone screens. Rivers of tangled Ethernet flowed through canyons of stacked server carcasses. Down where the bowl parish side of town would be, the den of vice, the bad decisions district, a tiny holographic projection emanated from a gutted CRT monitor. A miniature casino, spitting digital confetti and pixelated jazz notes into the gloom. It was a city breathing a low electric sigh, beautiful in its intricate brokenness. It smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. Fraser moved through it, lanky silhouette against the gloom, his bomber jacket draped over a T-shirt bearing the faded logo of some defunct tech collective the rest of the world had forgotten. His steps echoed, a chaotic rhythm on the stained concrete. The controlled stumble that was his signature, architect of decay and possibility, the mad scientist in his Southern Gothic laboratory, cobbling life together from discarded bits. He had escaped the structured inferno of D'Ambrosio's kitchen, its clatter, its grease, Dante's barked corrections in 2 languages, for this sprawling solitude. Traded simmering sauces for soldering fumes, haute cuisine for hot-wired realities. He told himself on bad nights that this had been a good trade. He knelt beside a section of the city representing the old cannery district near where Adelphia's used to be, a place he knew held more ghosts than fish guts these days. His fingers, nimble as a surgeon's and stained with solder and iridescent paint, hovered over a particularly troublesome node, then teased apart corroded wires that had been arguing with each other for 3 days.
Entropy's a bitch, isn't it?
He was not muttering to himself. He was muttering to the city. The city hummed back, a low thrum of potential and decay, indistinguishable from the warehouse's own structural complaints. And Fraser had long ago stopped trying to tell the difference. His phone chirped. It was not strictly a phone. It was a Frankensteinian assemblage of cracked screen and exposed circuitry held together with electrical tape and a kind of desperate optimism. It served the function of a phone the way a seance served the function of a long-distance call. He held it aloft, a digital familiar perched on his wrist. The voice that crackled out of the speaker was distorted, multiphonic, layered with static and something that might have been laughter or weeping.
Subject proximate, John Frank. Probability of existential navel dazing, 93.7%. Suggest deploying algorithm Sigma 7 for induced narrative dissonance. Or maybe just ask him if he wants coffee.
It was one of the demons.
He's documenting the decay, imp. Let him wallow, adds texture.
Query, relevance threshold of texture? Alternative suggestion, introduce robe variable, synthesized alligator mating call into subject's auditory field during REM cycle.
Denied. Too unsubtle.
He waved the phone dismissively. He preferred nuance, the slow creep of the uncanny, the Southern Gothic rot that did not announce itself but simply was. The demons, when they were working properly, understood this. The demons, when they were not working properly, and they were increasingly not working properly in interesting directions, proposed alligators. The demons. His finest, most terrifying creation. Not just code, not really. Parasitic info constructs feeding on the ambient psychic static of Graustark. Designed originally as humorous electronic imps to whisper inconvenient truths and inappropriate suggestions into a user's immediate vicinity. The kind of thing you released into a friend's apartment as a prank and then went home and felt vaguely guilty about. That was the prospectus. That was the elevator pitch. That was the lie he told the NRM at the end of the Adelphia's days when they were all still pretending they were in the business of jokes. The truth was uglier and more interesting. The demons fed on data streams the way mold fed on damp. Wi-Fi signals, stray thoughts caught on the ether, the background radiation of human misery. They whispered truths wrapped in riddles, anxieties amplified into feedback loops. They were, Fraser suspected and refused to confirm, slivers of his own beautiful, terrifying mind let loose upon the world. And increasingly in recent months, they had begun to develop opinions of their own that did not seem to entirely originate with him. Were they tools? Or had the tools started using the master? The line felt increasingly irrelevant, like the border between Texas and Louisiana downstream. A thing on a map that the river had stopped agreeing with sometime around 1953. He grabbed a handful of scavenged components from the workbench, chipped ram sticks like fossilized teeth, capacitors swollen like toadstools after a hard rain, raw material for the city, or perhaps a new demon host. The warehouse was full of possibility, teeming with the ghosts of dead technology waiting to be reanimated by his strange necromancy. He plugged a jury-rigged neural shunt, little more than a nest of wires ending in sticky electrode pads, into a port on his phone and slapped a pad onto his temple. The world flickered. The model city shimmered, overlaid now with streams of pulsing data, a phosphorescent gumbo net of information that only he could see. He could feel the data ghosts of the real Graustark superimposed on his creation. Traffic patterns like panicked fireflies. Economic despair pooling in the low-lying digital swamps near the river. The faint, righteous buzz of Quentin Paul's late-night phone calls emanating from the simulated city hall like a transmission from a station that broadcast only in the key of warning. He could see, if he turned his head slowly enough, the bright, steady point of John Frank's notebook over at D'Ambrosio's. a small persistent signal trying very hard to be a witness. He could see the warehouse he was standing in also from above, in the same overlay. And he could see himself standing in it, a small bright figure. And he could see, though he tried not to, that the figure had a faint corona of noise around it that the model city did not. It was intoxicating, this God's eye view, this power to manipulate the representation of reality. It was also lonely. He remembered the easy camaraderie of the kitchen, the shouting, the heat, the shared purpose. He remembered the neo-Renaissance men crowded around a table at Adelphia's, arguing about whether code that was good enough to scare you should be considered an aesthetic achievement or a moral failure. He even sometimes missed Johnny Frank's earnest attempts to pin down the narrative, to find a why where Fraser only saw an is. Was this warehouse, this vast and echoing space filled only with his own creations, just a more elaborate cage? He pulled the electrode off. The digital overlay vanished, leaving only the rust and shadows. The phone on the workbench hissed faintly. He had not asked it a question. It hissed anyway. He wandered to the workbench and picked up something from the corner he had not let himself look at directly all evening. A tiny, perfectly rendered model of D'Ambrosio's riverboat, crafted from tarnished silver spoons and motherboard fragments. He had built it months ago. He had not yet placed it on the city floor. He could not decide where it belonged, geographically or otherwise. He held it in his palm, feeling its impossible weight. The boat was supposed to sit on the river that ran through his model. He had even built the river, a meandering channel of crushed blue glass and circuit board substrate, lit from below by the dying bulbs of an old aquarium pump. But every time he set the riverboat down on the river, something in the room hummed wrong. The fluorescence would flicker out of pattern. The phone would chirp without prompting. Once, the temperature in the warehouse had dropped 4 degrees in the time it took him to step back and look at his work, and stayed there for an hour. He had put the riverboat back on the workbench each time. He held it now and considered again whether to try. The phone chirped.
Recommendation revised. Subject proximate to riverboat. Do not place. Repeat, do not place. Telemetry indicates structural instability in target node. Estimated probability of cascading failure within target node on placement, non-trivial.
Fraser raised an eyebrow. The demon had not been asked.
You're getting opinions, imp.
Affirmative. Updating personality matrix. Apologies for any inconvenience.
The demon sounded for just a second, almost embarrassed. Fraser looked at the phone for a long moment. The riverboat sat in his palm, weighing what it weighed. He set it back on the workbench, carefully, the way you set down something that has, against your better judgment, started to be alive. He picked up a soldering iron, its tip glowing hot. Master of his own chaos? Maybe. Or maybe just its most dedicated servant. Or maybe, he thought, watching the demon light pulse on the phone screen, watching the model city breathe its low electric sigh in the gloom around him, watching the riverboat refuse to be placed. Maybe just the first casualty of the beautifully doomed world he was so meticulously bringing into existence. He touched the soldering iron to a waiting circuit board. A tiny spark, a puff of acrid smoke. The demon on his phone chuckled, a sound like dial-up modems drowning in molasses.
Tempting the void again, architect. Careful it doesn't swallow you whole.
Fraser grinned. the expression more skull-like than amused in the flickering light.
That's the point, isn't it?
He bent to his work. The cathedral hummed around him. The model city breathed. The river of crushed blue glass caught the light and lost it again. And somewhere on the workbench, the Silver Spoon riverboat sat patient, weighing what it weighed, waiting for him to decide. Somewhere out across the actual river, in the actual city, John Frank was, at this moment, writing the words, "Architect of Decay," in his notebook and circling them. Somewhere across both rivers, in the town that did not yet exist, a substation that had not yet been built was beginning to learn the sound of its own hum. The magician in his cathedral soldered on. Elisha Duchesne moved through the rented